Greetings and welcome. Today we're going to be painting this seascape right here. It's very much a beginner's guide. In it we talk about how to paint waves in the foreground, the middle ground, and the background. That way we can create some depth in a seascape, which I know can be kind of difficult. It's a little bit different than creating depth in a landscape. It follows the same general rules of having things becoming a little more simplified and impressionistic as they move into the distance, but I figured it would be a good way to start a seascape series in which we will build on in the following weeks. We'll add on more complicated things, but I figured this would just be a really good starting point, teach you everything you need to know about a simple seascape, and just have some fun with it as well. As per usual, you can find the full hour-long version up over on Patreon, along with over 40 other lessons. You can also get the digital sketch. This week, it isn't the traditional digital sketch that we normally do. It's more of a cheat sheet elaborating on how to do the foreground, middle ground, and background. That way, you can revisit it and immediately, quickly, just kind of pick up those ideas again. But that's what we're doing. I really hope you enjoy today's hour-long cut-up lesson thing, and let's jump into it. Today we're going to be using 4 colors: primary yellow, primary blue, Mars black, and titanium white. I'm going to begin here today, as I generally do, with a large square-headed brush. I'm going to dip the tip of it in some water to make sure it's nice and damp. This will condense the bristles, extend the wet life of my paint, and, of course, it will help me drag the paint across the canvas farther. Now I'm going to head over to my palette, and I'm going to create a dark blue that has hints of green. And this is going to be for the water in our foreground. So I'm going to take some primary blue, as you can see right there. I'm going to take some titanium white. This is going to help thicken up the pigment. Primary blue is innately very thin. And then I'm going to take some Mars black to darken it, because we do want a darker blue. Now, the Mars black and the titanium white are going to blend together in this mixture, make it a little bit more gray, but that's not a bad thing at all. We are working on our base layer, and we don't want it to be too vibrant. Now, I'm going to go over and grab just a hint of primary yellow, and this is going to add a hint of green to it. Not much at all, but it will be applied, and it'll make a difference in the lighter pigments. Now I'm going to take this, I'm going to apply it to the base of our painting where our water is going to be. So now we need something much brighter than this. So I'm going to start here with a lot of titanium white. I'm going to grab a hint, and I do mean a hint, not much at all, Mars black. I'm going to mix that in there. It's going to give it a little bit of a gray. Grab a little bit more. We don't want a pure white. Then I'm going to grab a hint of primary blue and about half of that of primary yellow. Now that I have this nice misty color, I'm going to apply it up here. Now as I get down towards the water, I'm not actually aiming for a sharp line. I want a little bit of a blend between the sky color and the color that we have down here. And I want that because I want it to look like the water is getting lost in the diffused mist of the background. Now I'm going to create a line here separating the two. Blend it up nicely. Here you can see I have a little bit of unmixed gray on my brush. So I'm going to spill all of my water on my floor. Oh my. And then just blend this out. Then I'm going to blend the misty sky down into the water, as you can see here. You can bring it down a little bit farther. We just want a very soft, almost unnoticeable transition from one to the next. Now I'm going to jump right back into the painting with my smaller square-headed brush, and I'm going to use this because it's much more detail-oriented, but it still has these nice sharp edges to help me define all of my line work. So I'm going to take some of our titanium white, going to mix in about half that of primary blue, a hint of our primary yellow, and then also a hint of Mars black. Not much at all though. Can easily overwhelm the rest of your pigments. And now we have a little bit of a highlighted pigment. And I'm going to come down here, and I'm just going to... Hi, Howie. Howie's apparently woken up and joining our little painting class today. I'm now going to take this highlight, and I'm going to define the tops of a wave. Just like that. Now I'm going to take that pigment and I'm going to continue to create another wave. This one's going to be a little bit farther back. It's going to be a little bit smaller. Waves are all going to get smaller as we move into the distance because perspective is going to make them look smaller. You see how it connected right here as well. We're going to continuously do that for a little bit. But of course, these all look very two-dimensional. They look drawn on, and that's exactly what they are. They don't have any shading or depth yet. So let's add some of that. I'm going to take that same pigment, going to go to the top of this wave here, and I'm going to blend backwards from the top. Just like this. And the goal is to have it the most opaque here at the front of the wave and then get more and more transparent as we move into the back of the wave. Just like that. Right under the wave it's much darker because the light can't penetrate that much water, but it can get the tops of these waves, which is why they're brighter. Now we can actually make our waves look a little bit more three-dimensional by making them have more than one or two sides. So here we have the front side and we have the back side, which is opposite to us. The back side is highlighted, the front side is dark. But let's add a third side to it. So I'm going to move this down and it's going to connect into another wave. Now our wave has three sides, the one facing the back and these two that are kind of facing us. This side is going to get a little bit more light than this one because it's facing the back slightly less. Hey Howie. Want the pets? Yeah. Now I'm going to make some more of my highlighted pigments. I'm starting with titanium white, grabbing some primary blue, grabbing a hint of this primary yellow, mixing up a nice bright, almost teal pigment. And I'm going to reapply the highlights of our waves. Because acrylic paints dry semi-transparently, when you apply your first light layer over this dark layer, a lot of it's going to be lost. And it's going to look a little bit darker. So here we're just going back in and reworking it. Now waves can be made up of many little waves as well. So here I'm going to take more of that highlight, and as I come down from this nice, opaque, large highlighted area, I'm going to start tapping on little applications here, and it's little waves creating this larger wave here. It's going to give us a lot of detail here in the foreground and make it look much more real and natural. As I get farther and farther away from the top of the wave, I allow it to dissipate and more space to be left in between each little marking. There we go. Now let's continue with our waves moving outwards. So I'm going to take some of our titanium white, some primary blue, hint of our primary yellow. You can see how consistent we are with making this color now because we've made it a couple of times. I generally like to mix a small amount of color initially and then remix it. That way I'm in practice of making it and I don't forget for the next time. Here, creating some nice waves, but the paint is still wet right here, so you can tell that I'm not getting as stark of an application as I did over here. It's blending much more. Here I'm going to blend the top of this wave back into this one, And then with this tapping motion, blend downwards, allowing it to dissipate as we get farther and farther away from the top of this one. And then it can turn upwards a little bit as we move into this wave. Now I'm going to go back and add a little bit more highlight to the top because we are working over a darker color, and it is blending with that. There we go. Now, as we get farther and farther away from our foreground, we're going to make the tops of our waves a little bit less bright. So here I'm mixing in a little bit more primary blue, grab a little bit more of that primary yellow, just like that. And we're not going to create all of these triangular wave shapes once we get far enough back. And I'll show you quickly how they dissipate. So we have these wave shapes. They're all pretty similar. Then eventually, as you get far enough away, you move almost into this Z-like pattern. Then, as you get very far away, you move from this Z-shaped pattern to horizontal lines. Little taps of water. Just like that. It moves into more simpler shapes as it moves into the background. It's amazing how quickly and easily depth is achieved just through that practice. But we did apply it still over a darker layer, so we need to go back and do a couple touch-ups, highlights. So I'm creating a slightly brighter mixture than what we just had. Mixing it on top, but I'm leaving the side noticeable so that I know that I actually am using a bit of a brighter pigment. I'm going to use this on the ones that are a little bit closer to us. Now, there are only really two large waves here in the foreground, so you don't have to go back and change much, but I'm going to make sure that they match. I'm going to show you how to turn this one into looking more like this one, because if you wanted to turn this one into this one, you do it very easily by just taking more opaque pigment, applying it to the top here, creating a much sharper edge, and then it would look quite similar. But we're going to turn this one more into this one because I do want there to be a little bit more texture and movement in the painting. So for that, I'm going to take some of my Mars Black, some primary blue, hint of titanium white, hint of our primary yellow as well. Mix up a nice dark color like we had initially. And I'm going to work this from the bottom up into our wave. So we're working backwards here, which really isn't a bad thing. And I'm doing it with the tap motions that we applied our highlight with. Trying to keep the top line still fairly noticeable. I'm even going to throw in a couple of these into the background here, just because it also got fairly light fairly quickly. Going to make it a little bit more opaque, adding in some extra Mars Black, extra titanium white, primary blue to throw that saturation back in there, and then a hint of our yellow. Notice how this line isn't perfect. There are little indentations where the water is going out a little bit or dipping inwards. We're going to do that on this side as well. It's a good way to add a little bit of extra detail. And then I'm going to add a little bit of water that's kind of flying off of them. So here I'm using the corner, the tip of my square-headed brush. And I'm just creating all of these little taps and implications of water flying off the top of our little wave here. Do that over here. I'm trying to make it fairly directional so it's all moving and splashing in the same way. Makes the wind look fairly concise, but again, if you want a really windy day, then it could splash in different directions, as the waves will be moving in different directions. Now, if you really want your painting to pop, we can add a little bit of extra saturation in the painting. So here I'm going to grab some primary blue, some of our primary yellow, going to grab a good amount of our titanium white, mix up a much more saturated teal. And you can tell it's more saturated than anything else because if you look on our palette, that is by far the most saturated pigment. And we can take this, we can just work this subtly into the background. Hey there, it's Ryan O'Rourke. I truly hope you enjoyed today's little extra video. It was essentially a cut-up version of one of the many hour-long lessons which we offer over on patreon.com. Over there you'll also find digital sketches of the 10-minute painting lessons, digital sketches of these hour-long painting lessons, and a bunch of reference photos as well. So if any of that interests you, or if you just want to support the channel, go over there and check it out. It is a pleasure to make these long form videos, and I love to share them with all of you. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you next Saturday with a new video, and above all, as always, stay creative.